In the late 1980s, Japan's economy was a juggernaut, an enviable paragon of success that mesmerized the world. The nation was riding the crest of a wave, powered by an economic boom so vigorous that it seemed unstoppable. This was a time when Japan's corporate giants and their cutting-edge technologies were setting the global standard, and the country's cultural exports were beginning to leave an indelible mark on the world stage. Tokyo's neon-lit skyline symbolized not just Japan's prosperity, but its seemingly unassailable economic might. However, beneath this glittering surface lurked the seeds of a crisis that would lead to what is known as the Lost Decade. Welcome to another episode of Plaid Chronicles. From 1986 to 1991, Japan's asset price bubble ballooned to dangerous proportions. The Bank of Japan, in an attempt to stimulate growth, had opened the floodgates of monetary policy. Money flowed like water, and the banks, awash with cash, handed out loans with an almost reckless abandon. Real estate and stock market prices soared to dizzying heights, creating an illusion of wealth that was as intoxicating as it was unsustainable. Real estate in particular became the focus of speculative frenzy. Property values in Tokyo and other major cities reached astronomical levels. At the peak of the bubble, the value of the land underneath the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was said to be greater than the entire real estate value of California. This hyper-inflated market was not just a Japanese phenomenon, it was a global spectacle, drawing awe and envy from around the world. The stock market, too, mirrored this explosive growth. The Nikkei stock average, which tracks the performance of the Tokyo Stock Exchange, skyrocketed, reaching its all-time high in December 1989. This surge in stock prices was not entirely reflective of corporate earnings or economic fundamentals. Instead, it was fueled by a speculative fervor that gripped the nation. In the wake of World War II's devastation, Japan embarked on a journey of unprecedented economic resurgence, a period that came to be known as the Japanese economic miracle. This era was not just a chapter of recovery, it was a saga of transformation that propelled Japan to become the world's second largest economy, a narrative interlaced with the intricate dynamics of global politics and strategic alliances. The 1950s marked the beginning of this remarkable transformation. Emerging from the ruins of the war, Japan's economy began to show signs of recovery in the early part of the decade. The annual GDP growth rate consistently hovered above 9%, with some years witnessing even more staggering double-digit growth. This remarkable turnaround laid the foundation for future economic expansion, setting Japan on a path of rapid industrialization and technological advancement. As Japan entered the 1960s, the economic miracle reached its zenith. The decade is often remembered as the pinnacle of Japan's post-war economic resurgence. The annual GDP growth rate frequently exceeded an astonishing 10%, peaking at around 13% in the early 1960s. A key driver of this explosive growth was the income doubling plan initiated by Prime Minister Hayato Ikeda, which aimed to double the national income and elevate living standards across the country. This ambitious plan was not just a blueprint for economic growth, it was a vision for societal transformation. The success of Japan during these miracle years was deeply intertwined with the geopolitical context of the Cold War. The United States, determined to prevent the spread of communism in Asia, viewed a prosperous Japan as a critical ally against Soviet influence. This led to significant American involvement in rebuilding Japanese society, encompassing wide-ranging economic, political, and civic reforms. The U.S. support, while strategically motivated, facilitated Japan's rapid economic development. Key characteristics define the Japanese economy in this era: the keiretsu system of interlinked corporations, the practice of collective bargaining known as shunto, and the promise of lifetime employment in large corporations and unionized factories, known as shushin koyo. This unique economic structure fostered an environment of cooperation, stability, and employee loyalty, contributing significantly to Japan's growth. Moreover, the alliance with the United States played a crucial role. American policies that absorbed Japanese exports, tolerated Japan's trade practices, provided economic subsidies, and transferred technology to Japanese firms, magnified the effectiveness of Japan's trade policies, and bolstered its economic expansion. As this economic euphoria reached its zenith, few could imagine the impending downfall. The government, buoyed by years of prosperity, was slow to recognize the warning signs. The excessive monetary easing by the Bank of Japan had created an artificial economic environment, a house of cards that was bound to collapse under its own weight. The renowned Japanese writer Haruki Murakami once said, "Everybody has to start somewhere. You have your whole future ahead of you. Perfection doesn't happen right away." This quote poignantly captures the optimism and unbridled ambition of Japan during its economic boom, but it also serves as a prescient warning of the hubris that led to the eventual downfall. As the 1990s dawned, the bubble burst, and Japan's economy was thrust into a period of stagnation and deflation that would last for over a decade. This marked the beginning of the lost decade, a time of economic hardship and introspection that would profoundly reshape Japan's place in the world. As the 1990s dawned, Japan's economic landscape, once a shimmering mirage of boundless prosperity, began to crumble. The bubble that had inflated the Japanese economy to dizzying heights burst, and what followed was a descent into a decade-long stagnation, a period that would come to be known as the Lost Decade. In the early 1990s, the first signs of trouble appeared. The stock market, which had been soaring on the wings of speculation, plummeted sharply. The Nikkei stock average, which had reached its zenith at the end of 1989, began a precipitous fall. By October 1992, it had lost more than half of its peak value. Real estate prices followed suit, collapsing under the weight of their own unsustainable growth. The rapid decline in asset prices left banks with a mountain of bad debts, as borrowers struggled to repay loans taken out against now devalued assets. The Japanese economy, once an exemplar of growth and stability, was now mired in deflation and low growth. Prices fell, consumer spending retracted, and the once vibrant economic activity slowed to a crawl. As the economic crisis deepened, the Japanese government grappled with how to respond. The initial policy response involved fiscal stimulus and monetary easing. However, these measures had limited success. The government's fiscal interventions, while substantial, were often seen as too little, too late. The Bank of Japan, on the other hand, was criticized for not acting aggressively enough to combat deflation and stimulate the economy. In the mid-1990s, the political landscape in Japan began to shift in response to the ongoing economic crisis. A series of prime ministers came and went, each trying in their own way to address the country's economic woes. This period saw the implementation of various financial reforms aimed at stabilizing the banking sector and restoring confidence in the financial system. The government introduced measures to deal with the bad debt problem, including the establishment of the Resolution and Collection Corporation in 1999 to consolidate and manage distressed assets. However, the challenges were compounded by the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s. This crisis, which began in Thailand in 1997 and quickly spread to other Asian economies, led to a further slowdown in the Japanese economy. Japan, a major trading partner and investor in Asia, was significantly impacted by the regional economic instability. The crisis affected Japanese exports and contributed to the prolongation of Japan's economic stagnation. Throughout this period, the Japanese people faced the brunt of the crisis. Unemployment rose, wages stagnated, and the once secure lifetime employment system began to erode. The Japanese public, long accustomed to steady economic progress, now faced uncertainty and hardship. Amidst this economic turmoil, a famous quote from Albert Einstein resonates: "In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity." This sentiment reflected the mindset of those in Japan who saw the crisis not just as a challenge, but as a chance to reform and rebuild. It was an opportunity to address long-standing structural issues in the economy, to overhaul the banking system, and to lay the groundwork for a more sustainable economic future. The lost decade was not just a period of economic hardship, but also a time of introspection and transformation for Japan. It forced a reevaluation of the economic policies and practices that had driven the country's post-war success. The crisis led to significant changes in corporate governance, financial regulation, and economic policy, laying the foundation for a more resilient economy. As the decade drew to a close, Japan was slowly finding its footing. The economic landscape that emerged was markedly different from the heady days of the bubble era. The lost decade taught Japan and the world valuable lessons about the dangers of asset bubbles, the importance of prudent financial regulation, and the need for agile and effective economic policy making in the face of crisis. In the wake of the lost decade, the Japanese economy faced the dawn of the new millennium, not with a sense of triumph, but with the sobering reality of ongoing challenges. The nation, once an economic titan, had been humbled, its weaknesses laid bare for the world to see. Yet, in the spirit of resilience and adaptability that has long characterized Japan, the country embarked on a journey of recovery and reform, navigating the turbulent waters of the global economy with a quiet determination. The early 2000s were marked by concerted efforts to enact structural reforms. The Japanese government, acutely aware of the need for change, initiated a series of measures aimed at revitalizing the economy. These reforms targeted various sectors, including the banking system, corporate governance, and the labor market. The goal was clear: to create a more flexible, dynamic, and sustainable economy. However, the path was fraught with challenges. Japan continued to grapple with deflation, a problem that stubbornly persisted despite various monetary policy measures. The country's public debt ballooned, becoming one of the highest in the developed world, a legacy of years of government spending to stimulate the stagnant economy. In 2008, as Japan was still finding its footing post-lost decade, the world was rocked by the global financial crisis. This new economic upheaval, originating in the United States with the subprime mortgage crisis, quickly spread across the globe, presenting Japan with a fresh set of challenges. The crisis impacted Japan's exports, a crucial driver of its economy, and plunged the nation back into recession. The ripple effects of this global downturn were felt deeply in Japan, complicating the country's already delicate recovery process. The 2010s ushered in a new era in Japanese economic policy with the advent of Abenomics, named after Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Abenomics was a bold and ambitious economic program aimed at pulling Japan out of deflation and kickstarting growth. It was built on three arrows: aggressive monetary easing, flexible fiscal policy, and structural reforms. The Bank of Japan, under Governor Haruhiko Kuroda, implemented unprecedented monetary easing measures, including negative interest rates. The government ramped up spending, and a series of reforms were launched to address issues such as labor market rigidity and corporate governance. However, the success of Abenomics was mixed. While it succeeded in boosting stock prices and weakening the yen, thereby helping exporters, the program struggled to achieve its inflation target and to spur significant wage growth. The structural reforms, crucial for long-term sustainability, proved challenging to implement fully, due in part to deep-seated social and political dynamics. In the present day, Japan continues to face significant challenges. The nation's demographic crisis, characterized by an aging population and a declining birth rate, poses a profound challenge to its economic prospects. An aging workforce and a shrinking consumer base have far-reaching implications for economic growth, social welfare, and public finance. Japan's efforts to stimulate growth and innovation are ongoing as it seeks to adapt to these demographic shifts while maintaining its place in the global economic order. The long-term impact of the lost decade and its aftermath on Japanese society and the economy has been profound. Japan's experience has led to significant changes in corporate governance, with a greater emphasis on shareholder value and transparency. Economic policies have become more nuanced, balancing the need for fiscal discipline with the imperative of economic growth. The lessons of Japan's lost decade and its aftermath are not just for Japan. They hold valuable insights for other economies facing similar challenges. The dangers of asset bubbles, the complexities of monetary and fiscal policy in a deflationary environment, and the challenges of structural reform are issues that many economies confront. Renowned physicist Stephen Hawking once said, "Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change." This sentiment resonates with Japan's journey through the lost decade and beyond. The nation's response to its economic challenges reflects a profound capacity for adaptation and resilience. Japan's story is not one of uninterrupted success, but rather a testament to the enduring spirit of a nation that has continually reinvented itself in the face of adversity. As Japan looks to the future, it does so with a keen awareness of the lessons of the past. The story of its economic rise, fall, and ongoing efforts to reinvent itself offers a narrative rich in lessons about the dynamics of global economics, the interplay of domestic and international forces, and the resilience of nations in the face of change. Japan's journey through the lost decade and beyond remains a compelling chapter in the annals of economic history, a chapter that continues to evolve in the ever-changing landscape of the global economy. If this narrative resonated with you, do support us. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe. Thank you for staying with us to the end. See you in the next video on Plaid Chronicles.